Hello, and welcome to part one of our Supporting Neurodivergent Thinkers series offered by Western Washington University's Counseling Center. In this session, we will define neurodiversity and describe what we might mean by having a balanced perspective when it comes to using this umbrella term or its labels in the first place. So thank you for joining us. So first, we're going to give you a definition of neurodiversity, which is defined here as the natural variation in the kinds of brains similar to the biodiversity we see between different species on Earth. Put another way, what we mean when we say neurodiversity is we all have different brains, and therefore we all see the world a little bit differently. So we want to take a quick moment to discuss what we might mean by neurodivergent or neurominority conditions or identities. And it's represented, I think, really lovely here from a visual from the Genius Within. A quick note, if you're using screen reading technology to view this workshop series, and for whatever reason, we're not picking up this visual, I will be providing links to all of these original resources in a guide, so you can check it out later. But I did want to review a few lovely things about this particular visual representation from the Genius Within. One, I think it's pretty comprehensive just in terms of moving beyond what we typically think about when we think about neurominorities, which frankly is ADHD and autism. But neurominorities also encompass a wide variety of learning differences, let's say, and other conditions. And I will say, just as a note, like we're having lots of conversations about what other things might be included under the neurominority or neurodivergent umbrella all the time. So by the time you see this presentation, there might be new ones added to the list. But for now, one other thing I really appreciate about this visual representation of neurominorities is it really highlights the strengths that we can see with some of these conditions. So for example, with ADHD, they list some strengths including creativity, hyperfocus, and energy and passion. And they're suggesting here that ADHD might also share the strength of hyperfocus with Tourette's syndrome. So one thing we're going to be stressing throughout the series of workshops is we want to really recognize the reality that there are some challenges associated with neurominority identities, having a brain that's slightly different from what we sometimes refer to as a neurotypical brain. And there's also some real strengths that come with some of these conditions. So one I wanted to review that's in this visual that we might be a little bit less familiar with is DCD, which stands for Developmental Coordination Disorder and refers to an impairment in the learning of coordination or motor skills. Couple of quick examples here. So one thing that some clients or some folks report if they have a neurominority identity is sometimes when they were young, it was kind of occupational therapy that they first encountered as they were having issues with those motor skills and sometimes with some sensory processing as well. Another way this can show up is that a lot of people joke, let's say who have ADHD, that, whoa, I have bruises on me all the time. I do not remember how I got those. There's just a little bit of clumsiness going on. And sometimes a little bit of a inability to notice, like when we're feeling that pain, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So stay tuned. Another one of these conditions we might be a little less familiar with is dyscalculia. And we're going to be learning a little bit more about this particular impairment related mostly to mathematics in a later workshop where a wonderful college student who is living with dyscalculia talks about her experience advocating for herself in that college setting. So one other quick note about language here. It's a little bit picky, but just so you're aware, when we refer to neurodiversity, a lot of people these days use that term as an umbrella term for everybody and their neurotype. So whether you're neurodivergent or a neurominority or you're considered neurotypical, neurodiversity encompasses all of those brains and all of those ways of being and thinking. Whereas when we say neurodivergent or neurominority, usually that's referring to one of the identities or conditions under this umbrella. So I wanted to mention that. All right, so now we're going to talk a little bit about the neurodiversity movement, which has been building for many years. So a couple of key tenets of the neurodiversity movement is that first, neurodiversity exists. So ADHD is real, autism is real, those learning differences we talked about on the previous slide, all real. And not only are they real, but again, really wanting to stress, it's a natural variation in the way a brain works. So we're going to be coming back to this theme again and again. It's not a deficit, it's a difference. So it's a difference in the way a brain works, not necessarily a deficit. And so therefore, another really big thing that the neurodiversity movement has been trying to communicate is that, those neurominority conditions or neurodivergence is not a disease that needs to be cured because it's a natural variation in the way that a brain works. And while challenges can exist, neurodivergent brains have certain strengths and can look at problems and situations slightly different than neurotypical folks, which can, in fact, be valuable. Now, the challenges piece, though, again, is really important to emphasize. But one thing the neurodiversity movement encourages us to consider is where these challenges are sort of originating or coming from. And so this leads us to this concept of the social model of disability. And this concept is that many challenges associated with being neurodivergent result from social and environmental factors rather than the conditions of being neurodivergent in the first place. And so let me give you a quick example. The neurodiversity movement really borrowed a lot of this idea and language about the social model of disability from some incredible work over the years of advocates, particularly around physical disability. So a good example of the social model of disability is the idea of accessibility of certain buildings or spaces. So in order to make spaces more accessible, for example, for somebody who's using a wheelchair, we would build a ramp, right? So what we would do is not say, well, we need to teach everybody and we need to make sure that everybody can access a building in exactly the same way. Like we just need to focus on the fact that everybody should be able to climb a set of stairs in order to access a space. No. What we want to emphasize is how can we account for difference in the way people could access a building by making it accessible for everyone. So it's not necessarily about the physical disability itself that keeps someone from accessing a building using stairs. It's the fact that we live in a society that doesn't always provide the necessary accommodations or support for everybody to be able to enter a building. So a few examples that might be a little bit more neurodiversity specific or related is kind of this assumption in our society that everybody has to be like very productive and very efficient at all times. Sometimes that's a societal norm that's really pushed by our economic system and our culture that doesn't necessarily work for, let's say, a brain that struggles with variable attention. So it's not necessarily a problem or a deficit that somebody has variable attention. It's that we live in a culture that expects that productivity and that sense of being efficient at all times. That's really more of the issue. Another example could be related to communication. So a quick example is it's a pretty strong norm in American culture, not in all cultures around the world, but in American culture, that good eye contact is a sign of effective social interaction or communication. but who says? Like, why do we have that particular norm versus recognizing that folks who maybe can't make eye contact because it's physically painful for them due to their neurodivergence are probably listening just as well or better as somebody who is staring directly into your eyeballs. There's also kind of this assumption that people who are non-speaking, let's say, aren't like verbal or aren't folks who can communicate in other ways, when nothing is further from the truth, because with some assistive technologies, let's say, there's a variety of ways that people can communicate, even if the physical ability to speak is not there. And so rather than focusing on like, let's fix that thing, let's think about, can we think more expansively about the diversity that exists and recognize that just because it's a difference in communication doesn't mean it's a deficit, and how can we accommodate for that, or how can we recognize that it's not a deficit, it's just a difference. So that's the social model of disability in the smallest of nutshells. That's a complicated topic that I probably did not do full justice to, but hopefully some of those examples were helpful. So that leads us to a balanced perspective. So this is a little bit of a summary of some of these really heavy concepts we've been discussing thus far. So if we look at the left side of the screen, labeling mental health conditions results in othering and places the focus on the disorder rather than the problem. And again, the problem being kind of these societal expectations around certain conformity when it comes to the way people move through the world. And so that can really be problematic because it promotes ableism, which we're going to discuss in detail during the next workshop session. So we're kind of trying to stay away from that left side of labeling and othering. We're also trying to consider the ways in which what we see on the right side might be problematic. So ditching the label or just not having any sort of label at all erases the real problems that come with having a neuro-minority identity, particularly in a neurotypical society with those expectations, and it can increase barriers to resources. So what we're trying to aim for here is the middle ground, the balance of using labels to get our needs met and recognizing that wellness does not necessarily involve making you more neurotypical. And so that is the balanced perspective that we're really going to try to thread through the entire remainder of this workshop series. So I'm excited you're here on this journey with us, and we'll see you next session. Until then, be well, WW, and take care.